What if pretty much the entire field of economics could be boiled down to just one single powerful lesson? Well, according to Henry Hazlitt's famous book, it absolutely can. And once you get this one idea, I promise you are never going to look at a headline about jobs, taxes, or government spending the same way again. So this is it. This is the one lesson. It's not about complicated charts or jargon you can't understand. It's simply about training your brain to see the whole picture. The trick is to look past what's right in front of your face, past the obvious, and trace the ripple effects of any economic choice, through time and across everyone it touches. You can think of this lesson like a new pair of glasses. The second you put them on, you suddenly see all the things that are hidden in plain sight. It's the tool that lets you separate clear, sound economic thinking from all the common mistakes and fallacies we hear every single day. And here's the core difference. Bad economics, well, it gets fixated on the short-term benefit for one specific group, what Hazlitt calls the seen effects. But good economics, that forces us to ask the tougher questions. What happens down the road? And how does this actually impact everybody? It's all about learning to spot the unseen. Okay, so to make this really concrete, Hazlitt uses this brilliant little story that just perfectly illustrates the one lesson. It's known as the broken window fallacy. So the story goes like this. A kid throws a brick and shatters a baker's window. A crowd gathers and someone says, "Hey, look on the bright side. This is great for the glazier. He gets $50 for a new window and he'll spend that money and it'll create even more business," right? It sounds like destruction actually created economic activity. That is the seen consequence. But what about the unseen? And this right here, this is the unseen consequence. You see, the baker was planning to spend that exact same $50 on a new suit. So yeah, the glazier gains a customer, but the tailor just lost one. No new jobs or wealth were actually created. The community has a new window, sure, but it lost out on a new suit. We can all see the repaired window, but we will never see the suit that was never made. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's a pretty simple story, kind of obvious. But Hazlitt's whole point is that this exact same mistake, this fallacy, shows up all the time in much, much bigger and more sophisticated arguments about the economy. He uses this fantastic line to talk about the argument that huge destruction, like a war, is actually good for the economy, because of all the rebuilding and pent-up demand that comes after. People see the massive construction projects, but they completely forget what was lost and what could have been built instead. This really gets to the heart of the mistake. Replacing something that was destroyed is not a net gain. It's just a diversion of resources. Think about it. A country rebuilding its factories isn't getting richer. It's just desperately trying to get back to where it started. All that money and all that labor is being pulled away from creating new things that would have actually made life better. So this leads to a pretty common question. If destruction isn't a net plus, what about constructive government spending? Like, say, building a bridge to create jobs. Surely that's different, right? Well, according to Hazlitt, no. It's the same exact fallacy, just wearing a different disguise. Let's take that public bridge. We can see it being built. We see the workers cashing their paychecks. It's right there in front of us. But what don't we see? The taxes. To pay for that bridge, the government has to take money from people. And that's money that those taxpayers can no longer spend on things they wanted. A new car, fixing the roof, maybe some new clothes. The unseen part is the private job that was never created, the car that was never built, because that money was diverted to the government's project. So Hazlitt's conclusion on this is pretty blunt. When a government project is sold to us based on creating jobs, it's usually just shuffling employment around. We've created jobs for bridge builders at the expense of jobs for car makers or home builders. The country gets a new bridge, yeah, but it loses out on all the other stuff that money would have created instead. All right, let's pivot to another classic fear that really relies on the same kind of short-sighted thinking, the idea that machines and automation are job killers. Hazlitt points us to history. Back in 1760, when new cotton spinning machinery was invented, there were about 7,900 people working in that industry in England, and workers, understandably, freaked out, rioting because they thought the machines would replace them. But just 27 years later, after those same machines were everywhere, the number of workers had exploded to 320,000. I mean, that is a 4,400% increase. How on earth is that possible? Well, people only saw the specific jobs that were immediately replaced by a machine. They didn't see the long-term effects.
The machines made clothes way cheaper, so demand went through the roof, and the whole industry grew so much that it created vastly more jobs than existed before. And yet, that fear just never seems to go away. I mean, look at this quote from 1945. Even really smart, influential people worry that new tech is a threat. It's that same broken window logic. You're only focusing on the one worker who's immediately displaced, the seen part of the story. Hazlitt's comeback to this kind of thinking is just so sharp and witty. He basically says, look, if the goal is just to have as many jobs as possible, no matter how inefficient, why use railroads? We could employ way more people to just carry all the freight on their backs. The goal of an economy isn't just jobs for jobs' sake, it's production. It's about getting more stuff with less effort. So the real story, the long-term result of labor-saving machines, is that they make everyone better off. They let us produce more overall, which raises our standard of living. Goods get cheaper for all of us, and that actually increases what our paychecks can buy in the long run. It's the engine of progress. Okay, so we've seen this with a broken window, a government bridge, and a new machine. And in every single case, the same lesson holds true. If you want to understand economics, you have to learn to see the whole story, not just the first chapter. Really, what this all boils down to is building a new habit of mind. It's the habit of looking past the immediate, obvious effects that help one group and forcing yourself to ask that critical question. Okay, but what are the delayed, invisible effects on everyone else? So if you only take two things away from this, let it be these two mistakes to avoid. First, the mistake of only looking at the short term. And second, the mistake of only looking at how something affects one particular group. If you see an argument doing either of those things, it's a huge red flag that you're only being told half the story. The next time you hear someone propose a new law, a new tax, a new program, just ask yourself this one simple but incredibly powerful question. What are they showing me, and what am I not seeing? Because learning to see the unseen, well, that's the first and most important step to really understanding the economic world around us.